Good evening, everyone. It's Hooves of Doom again with another video. And in this video, I'm going to be reviewing my crazy system of charts that I have created to select current and upcoming hobby projects. So I've mentioned this system in several videos over the past few months. I made the chart system at the beginning of January. And some of you expressed an interest in how it's organized and maybe an interest in making the the same type of chart system for yourself. Um, some of you might know that I'm currently working on Wood Elves and Tomb Kings, and I will begin working on an army of Cadian shock troops in April, and after that, an Empire army for AOS. But with the exception of the elves, I've made all those selections on these charts. And this is a system of charts that was originally designed to choose armies. I have a lot of different armies for Age of Sigmar or Warhammer in the past, and before my wife and I would play a game, we'd go to this chart and roll to see what armies we would play, and it was just kind of a way to randomly choose something. Well, we're random every time we play, so it was pretty new and fresh and interesting. Um, when I'm choosing now, when I choose an army project, I like that it provides me some structure. It really does provide me with a nice degree of surprises, and again, it keeps things interesting and fresh. Often, the way I would just choose an army would be just random, and part of that is because I'm, I guess, kind of a little bit quirky in terms of the models that I collect because I don't really have a lot of particular favorites. I do like some armies a little bit better than others, but in general, it's always been my intention to collect them all. So the charts are fairly extensive, as you're going to see. Though, of course, if you made a type of chart system for yourself, you could just use the armies that you want and leave the ones that you don't like off, which is obviously fine. The charts use a simple D6 system. It doesn't. A D6 roll isn't necessarily always adequate for all the amount of choices or possibilities, but it's working thus far. And I've selected categories based upon factions that possess specific models and/or special rules, either in the past or now. So that's the reason why it's a very big chart system. I think there's 39, or I think there's actually more than that, different factions and armies on the chart. So, uh, and I'm constantly adding more as it goes. So this is an extent an examination of madness when it comes to trying to collect models. And it's one of the reasons why I try to stick just to Warhammer, because this is as massive as it is. And, I freely will admit, my collecting ambitions um, will probably extend over the course of my entire lifetime. I've been in the hobby about 17 years or so. I'll probably be in the hobby, for probably at least that long or longer. Depends on how long I live, I guess. Um, but it's a good part of the hobby for me, and really, no matter what happens, I'll be tinkering away at something Warhammer related. So some of the basic rules that I've created to accompany this chart. The goal is, in my mind, to nominate a force that I'm going to try to figure out. Something that will only take 1 to 2 months. So when I roll in the charts and I determine, okay, I'm going to work on, um, let's say, Eldar. I'm going to choose a smaller force that I think I can complete in 1 to 2 months. I don't want to. The goal is not to necessarily roll in this twice a year. Of course, that I could do that, and anyone could do that. But I like the idea of completing smaller projects that's just to keep things interesting, and I want to change things up and to um, work on as many different projects throughout the year as I can. Now, I'm not as burdened by that because once the Cadian shock troops are finished, I'll have an army of 40k, and for these bigger ones, I am doing like the Cadian army will be a complete Cadian army, so that might we'll see how long it takes me. I'm hoping it'll only take a couple months, but after that, I'll have a 40k army, and it won't be as big a concern. Then, if I go to Space Marines or something, I can choose a smaller force just to really work on. Same thing with Age of Sigmar. Now that I already have about 4 or 5 Age of Sigmar armies that are fully painted, ready to go, it's not that big of a deal if I just work on some smaller projects. So I like to select a mix of current and retro models, and I'll probably in the future collect both along the same. And maybe I'll, if I get an army that I don't really feel like I need current models for, for my Slaanesh Demon army, the only model that I would say I really might need for that would be the Keeper of Secrets from Forge World. I certainly don't need more regular demons. So at that point, what I'd probably do is get older demons, which I guess are just regular demons, but they at least look different, and it kind of gives the army. The older demons don't look particularly great necessarily, although the ones from the early 2000s are really spectacular. And I don't have any of those, so I'd love to pick up a few models here and there. But again, that's the concept of just to kind of go with current models, things that the armies need, but also if I think I have far too many of something, to kind of go back and pick up those older models for the sake of having a large collection of models that has kind of the history of Warhammer represented. So, as I mentioned, I'm working on some larger forces right now with the Cadians. I'm working on Tomb Kings this month. Wood Elf project's almost finished. The Empire project. I don't know if I'll get all of my Empire models finished with that. But one thing is if I want to change up armies fairly regularly, I need to make sure that there's a level of consistency in look and paint scheme and basing. I'm not at all averse to having 2 or 3 different Empire armies that represent, like one for Altdorf, one for Null, one for all the different states in the Empire, and you can certainly do that with many different armies. But I also know that my painting skill will probably increase as I continue to paint and work on projects. So overall, army consistency will, in terms of the look, in terms of how things are based, I think that's going to be something I need to pay attention to. But I totally recognize that maybe models I paint a year or two from now will look much better, hopefully, than models I paint now. But that's fine. I think every army, any army that you have for a number of years has that type of variation. So one of the other caveats that I've added into the chart system, and this was basically a necessity. A number of these items in the chart have a asterisk next to them, and what that means is that I already own existing models, and so I decided to prioritize armies that I have existing models for, and if I have maybe 2 or 3 competing selections, maybe I'll decide to pick the one that has the most unpainted models, something like that. The goal for me as a painter is to paint more models every year than I buy. Right now I'm a little bit behind in that, but I think by the end of this month I'll be caught up, and I don't need any more Cadians, and I don't plan on buying any more Empire. So that's a good opportunity for me to get ahead of the curve, and that would be an extraordinary achievement for me. I always buy way more models than I ever get painted. That's been my curse. So that's why I have so many models. And with that caveat, I think it helps. When I selected my 40k army, which is next, I did roll Imperial Guard, but I did not roll for Cadians. And I thought at the time, I was like, why would I paint up a different Imperial Guard army when I have a bunch of Cadian models that are unpainted? That makes perfect sense to me, and that's why I did it. So, Yeah, so over the course of the year, I'm going to keep track of the number of models that I buy versus the amount that I paint, and I really want to make some headway in that. And because of that, this chart system, although crazy, might not be too expensive, right? If you're thinking, oh, geez, if you are choosing a brand new army every couple months, it's a lot of money. Warhammer is very expensive. Wargaming is very expensive, or can be. But because I already have so many unpainted models, the hobby could, if I want, be quite cheap. I could work on unpainted armies for the next few years without buying a single model. Um, but that's just how it works. Anyways, enough of my just complete endless rambling. Let's look at those charts. So the first component of the charts is to select what exactly you're going to be working on. And again, if you have no interest in playing one of these games, fine. You don't have to have that in there. For me, as a Warhammer collector, I collect pretty much anything with the Warhammer label or title. And so it's divided between Age of Sigmar, 40k and 30k, and finally there's a 1 in 6 chance of train specialist games and board games. So, because I only have between 1 and 6 options, you roll dice and you determine what game system the next project will be. I wanted terrain to be and specialist games to be a kind of a minor element. That's why I only did it with 1 in 6 chance. That leaves the other two with one possibly between 1 and 3, or a 3 out of 6 and a 2 out of 6 chance. So one is leaning more heavily than the other, and I might change this up over time. But right now I have it leaning more towards Age of Sigmar. So half of the projects I'll be working on will be Age of Sigmar. A third of those would be 40k with the possibility of 30k, and 1/6 of the time I'll be working on terrain and specialist games. In the specialist games and board games, in case you're wondering, that's things like Space Hulk or Hero Quest or Battle Masters or I guess it would be Battlefield Gothic and things like that. And I haven't actually developed a chart system for that. So that might be something I need to do in the future. But for Age of Sigmar, it's divided between, the 4 main alliances: Order, Chaos, Death, and Destruction. Again, Order and Chaos have a 2 in 6 chance each of being selected. That's simply because there are more factions within those alliances. Within Order, you have Stormcast and Elves and Dwarves and so on. Within Chaos, you have Beastmen, Skaven, obviously Chaos Warriors and Demons. So there's just more in there than in Death and Destruction. So that's why it leans towards those. For 40k, a 1 in 5 chance will be 40k once it's selected, and a 1 in 6 chance will be 30k. And then within the 40k chart, the Imperium is about half of the, it is half of the possibilities. Chaos is 1 in 6, and Xenos or aliens are between 5 and 6. So if I have Order selected under Age of Sigmar, that then gets broken down between the Seraphon, the humans, which is only a 1 in 6 chance, which is then subdivided by humans, Bretonnians, and a possibility of doing Kislev on a 1 in 6. The elf factions, there's High Elves, Wood Elves, Dark Elves. There's Dwarves, which are divided between the Steamhead or regular Dwarves and the new Slayers that have come out. And then Stormcast, and finally an option for Dogs of War. Now, I don't know, I might change this chart up because it just seems like the elves and humans should get a slightly higher possibility. So sometimes when I roll for the d6, I have other charts, as you'll see, that are divided then between two different charts. So that's like a 1 in 3 roll for one and a 4 to 6 for the other. and I might break that down because it doesn't quite seem. Certainly, I don't think Dogs of War should be a 1 in 6 on, have the same chance as Stormcast Eternals or Lizardmen. That just seems a little bit high. And then I have the Sylvaneth faction at the bottom there because I'm not really sure where to put those. In my mind, they're still Wood Elves, but they are a distinctive faction. So again, not really quite sure how to break that down. So this chart does need a little bit of tweaking. So under Chaos, it's more heavily leaning towards Warriors of Chaos with a 2 out of 6 chance, simply because I think of all the factions, they deserve a little bit more within Chaos. They're, in my mind, the best representative of what Chaos is, and they have the most amount of army selections in there, with the exception of Skaven. I lean it slightly more heavily towards Khorne, simply because I have a lot of Khorne models. Maybe in the end, if I get all those painted, I'll just make if I roll 6, it's just a reroll, something like that. Demons I don't place a huge priority on, simply because they actually appear in the 40k chart as well. So even though there are a lot of demon armies, and demons is one of the armies, or a fairly weak representative of them. I did finish a Slaanesh army recently, so that's why there's a more of an emphasis towards the Khorne de Tzeentch that I have a handful of models for that are unpainted. And then Beastmen are divided between the Brayherd and Goreherd, and you have the Skaven with all the different clans, and the Chaos Dwarves, finally a 1 in 6 chance. That would be interesting because I don't own any Chaos Dwarves. When I divide these, that doesn't mean when I go to play the game I can't mix and match, but for collecting purposes and for painting purposes, I want each to have a distinctive look to them. And so the final 2 alliances under Age of Sigmar are Death and Destruction. I lean more heavily towards Vampire Counts under Death, with then an equal distribution between Death Rattle, Flesh Eaters, and Malignants. And then under Destruction, again, I lean more heavily towards Orcs because there are far more Orc armies that are subdivided. There's no asterisks next to ogres, but I do own an ogre army. There's just, under ogres, there's no other smaller component there that I'm aware of. Maybe in the new forthcoming Destruction Alliance book, maybe they'll divide them up further or something, but that's not the case. So a lot of orcs to be painted. And the Vampire Counts are the only army that has no asterisks, even though I own a ton of Vampire Counts. The reason is because they're all painted, and the Tomb Kings will as well. So that would be the only alliance that's 100% painted. Okay, and now we're into the 40k. This is a big chart. Hopefully it's large enough for you guys to see. I thought I might divide it into different ones just for greater visibility, but hopefully you can at least get the sense. So if you roll for Imperium, this is the Imperium chart, believe it or not, and you roll dice. 1 to 2 is Space Marine, 3 to 4 Imperial Guard, 5 is Adeptus Mechanicus, and 6 is the Inquisition. Man, there are a ton of Space Marine chapters. I keep remembering more. I don't think there's Flesh Eaters on here. Now, as I said, I think there is a dedicated Flesh Eater character. I could be wrong with that, or certainly like a hero character. If that is, I'll have to add it in there. But I lean it more towards the more recognizable factions. So a 1 in 4 chance. Then you roll on a chart between 1 and 6, between Ultramarines, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Black Templar, and Salamanders, which are probably the 6 biggest Space Marine chapters. I put Black Templar in there simply because I have a Black Templar. Well, I have some Black Templar models from an old army I had, and I really love that army. And then on a 5 or 6, it's a 1 in 6 chance of some really important Space Marine chapters, but they're a little bit less represented. But they each still have dedicated models, so that's why they're on there. And I would love to get like a White Scars army. Anyways, I guess the point of all these charts is that I really want to collect them all at some point. Under Imperial Guard, this is an interesting chart because there's so many oldies in here. So it's leaning more towards the more modern armies, I guess you could say. The armies that have come out in the past 15 years for Imperial Guard. And then there are a couple like Elysian drop troops are really only through Forge World, as are Death Corps of Krieg, or Krieg. And but you got the Iron Guard, Valhalla, a Toleron, and Praetorians on there as well. So some really oldie ones. And again, if I select Valhalla, I'm not going to get an entire Valhalla army. It would probably just be a couple squads, something to use as like an allied force. I mean, I'm not. I like to think I'm at least somewhat realistic. Judging by these charts, probably not the case. But yeah, I'm well aware of some of the problems of trying to collect all these things. And then Adeptus Mechanicus would be fun. That's the only 40k army I don't have. And then I don't have Death Watch. You could argue it just came out in the box, but they had bits that you could get for Death Watch years ago, and to replace one of their arms with that particular icons and such. And I have a 1 unit of Sisters of Battle. I'm not looking to buy an entire army of pewter at a ridiculous amount of price. That would be a very small project. I'd probably finish my 1 unit, and if I rolled for it again, I would buy another one, something like that. So this is another rather long and extensive chart. Again, hopefully it's not too difficult to see. This is for Chaos and Xenos forces for 40k. And so obviously the biggest component here in Chaos is Chaos Space Marines, which have a 1 to 4 chance, and Demons, which have a 5 to 6. So as I mentioned earlier, the Demons were on the Age of Sigmar chart as well. So they have a little bit higher representation here. Between both charts, they should come up about as frequently as like Space Marines might, or something like that. But we'll see. Again, if I need to change the percentages, I can. That's no issue whatsoever. So under Chaos Space Marines, I have actually Emperor's Children should be asterisks as well, because I do have one model for Emperor's Children. But again, 1 through 5 are like the more conventional Chaos Space Marine chapters, in my mind at least. I know Crimson Slaughter in recent years has gone more prominence with the box set. And I would love to do Iron Warriors. Night Lords and Corsairs, or Red Corsairs, that are a little bit less represented, so they're don't have a higher chance of working on that army. And the Demons, the exact same as in the previous chart. Under Xenos, it's basically just a 1 through 6 for Eldar, Dark Eldar, Tyranids, Orcs, Tau, and Necrons. In many respects, I think the Eldar should get more preference because they have more smaller factions. There are, different Tyranid armies in terms of paint schemes, but they don't have any special rules really associated with those. Frankly, neither for the Tau. I added 1 Tau Sept on there. That's just a paint scheme, but there are rules for the Farsight enclaves, so those are fine. it's mostly just how do I represent this equally, and that's always kind of a challenge with these charts. I find for the Eldar, I have a ton of Eldar models. That's why I broke it down between, well, I guess all the craft worlds. Because if I have a unit of scouts, I guess they'll go with Altihawk. I have a bunch of grav tanks that are unpainted. They'll go to Ham Han. I have there is a Yulfway army in there, and a Baltan army. I got tons of aspect warriors, so I'll probably break these up as well. So when I get that, I'll go through the collection and I'll reorganize it based upon these criteria and determine what I want to work on. Again, the idea is to work on a project that only takes 1 to 2 months, at most 3 months. And then Dark Eldar, Tyranids, Orcs, Tau, and Necrons. And that completes this particular chart. And so the final chart is 30K, and it's simply broken down by the, I guess, 18 legions. And then, there's a possibility of doing like the 30K Imperial Guard. I don't have any major aspirations with 30K. In some ways, it's a little bit too new for me to kind of grasp. I know it's been around a little while, but the fact that it's all through Forge World, it would probably be quite small. That's why I guess it has a 1 in 12 chance of even being rolled on. So I might get like one of these projects every couple years, that type of thing, which is fine. Because Forge World models are really expensive, even with the Betrayal Calth box. But I really do love like the models for the Primarchs, and watching people play 30K. I would certainly, well, obviously, definitely consider collecting a 30K army. So again, it would be fairly small, build up over time. And this is the final chart. So my thoughts on the entire system is that it's kind of utter madness. And I kind of recognize that. I mean, obviously, to roll on each of these, within the course of even 10 years, is almost an impossibility. So it requires a very long approach. It requires kind of you to think, well, if you have a chart this extensive, again, you could cut down this by 90% easily and just do one for those armies that you like. But for me, as like an insatiable collector that wants every faction, it's kind of a problem. But this chart gives me some sort of structure. I think it's fun to roll on. Every time I've rolled on it, it's often given me some surprises. With Tomb Kings being no longer in Age of Sigmar, it's been nice to work on Tomb Kings, but I would never have thought to work on Tomb Kings had I not used the chart system. I would have selected probably something more like High Elves, mostly because I just bought the Tomb Kings for the most part in December and in January. So I have this propensity to kind of go back and work on the older models that I've had for years and years that are unpainted and try to work on those. And so I wouldn't be on Tomb Kings for a long, long time. So this is fun to kind of work on random. I like how it comes up. Again, I can make this as expensive or inexpensive as I want. If an army that I already have a lot of existing armies for, I can work longer on those. And if it's an army that I don't own any models for, I can just get something quite small and work on that and just build up a small collection. The idea for me over several years is to have many, many different armies, many different types of paint jobs, and ultimately have as many of these on display as I can. So hopefully some of you enjoyed going through this. Again, I can always tweak a lot of these charts if I need be. And yeah, thank you for tuning in if you've made it this far. and have a good one.